when you think about any special interest group, LGBT community, whether it be race, physical abilities, whether it be, what are you playing with his microphone?
Well, yes, he was holding it like this, and I thought, we're being filmed. Yeah.
Thanks, Mo. Yes.
You think, she's losing control. When you think of any group in politics, generally the groups are galvanized to action around a flashpoint. There is an event, there is a cause, there is something to do. When you think about the LGBT community in particular, especially since 2008 with the passage of Prop 8 in California, there has been this accelerated effort to try to bring the community to a higher visibility on the national level, which many would say we have certainly done. Certainly with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, that's huge. But let's face it, DC is probably a little tired of us. We're the child that's screaming for attention, and there are lots of other kids who need to get attention too. What can we do as a community when you think about keeping our needs and our interests present, because we're certainly by far from done on the equal rights front? What can we as a community do to keep these issues in front of our legislators in an appropriate way, to support our legislators, as well as make sure that we are not getting people a little too overtired of our topics?
Go ahead. All right.
After you.
Mo, this is the question that Mo paid me to answer. So, I think in many ways we're doing a lot of things right, actually. And I don't want to sort of pit communities against each other. But if you look at the past 3 years, our community has gotten a substantial amount of things done in the Obama administration that a lot of other communities, I don't think, can claim success to the same level that we can. And a lot of it is we had a really brilliant, I think, insider-outsider strategy, though I don't think it was coordinated at all. Actually, I know that it wasn't very coordinated. So you have groups who are doing some very traditional things, supporting candidates when they're running for office, helping them with their elections, working with the Obama campaign directly to try and make sure that he's reelected in 2008 to get him elected, and doing things that are very, very sort of traditional advocacy tools. And I think that those are really, really important because, it's expensive for folks to run campaigns. They're always looking for ways for folks to support them. And I think that the community has been there in the past for a lot of candidates for Obama. And I think that quite frankly, it wasn't the money that was important, it's the relationships. So when people are doing this, when they're contributing to candidates, it provides an opportunity for them to get to know folks on the campaigns, get to know the people who are eventually in government. And it's the relationships that I think are most important. But I do not want to, by any means, discount some of the folks who had a more grassroots strategy. Chaining yourself to the White House fence, I think that got a lot of attention. And I think that having...
Does it get the right kind of attention?
I think ultimately it might not be, quote unquote, the right type of attention, but it's the right, it keeps things moving. In politics, and we talked about this earlier, sometimes it takes a crisis for things to move. And so the grassroots sort of component of our community created that crisis really out of nothing by doing some very simple things, holding some protests, having people take some actions that were a little bit different. I would walk into the White House every day, and every day there were protesters. And this is sad, but quite frankly, you start to tune them out because they're there every single day. And so what Dan Choi did by chaining himself to the White House fence, whether you agree with the strategy or not, whether you agree he should have been in uniform or not, he was a protester in front of the White House fence that actually made a difference.
I guess I can I actually have a different kind of perspective on the answer on how to keep our issues, if you will, or our community's issues out in the forefront. Mm-hmm. I learned a valuable lesson the other day, and by the way, we today mourn Steve Jobs, who changed all our lives and changed the world and was an amazing, amazing man. I had the privilege of meeting his wife, Laureen, and I'm going to tell you the same thing I said to Laureen. Her nonprofit that she runs called the Emerson Collective, I believe, in Palo Alto, I went out and, at her invitation, went and sat with her. And she's trying to put money toward the DREAM Act, right? Everyone knows what that is, right?
Well, does everyone know?
Okay, the DREAM Act is the effort to get the children of undocumented immigrants who might have been brought here at the age of 2, again, you know, involuntarily. Their parents immigrated to here illegally, and they're 1, 2, baby, you know, whatever, and they were raised here. And we're trying to pass the DREAM Act, which will allow them to get in-state tuition at the collegiate level. Right now, they're not allowed to do that in most states, with the exception of a few. Anyway, this is an issue very near and dear to Laureen's heart. So she called me out there and asked me for advice. I'm going to give the LGBT community the same advice I gave her on the DREAM Act. And that is, I have a very different perspective. I say, if we want to keep our issues alive, we need to stop. Never stop. That's improper. We need to know who our friends are, but it's time to work on those who are not in our camp. That's how you keep the issues alive. So in her case, for example, it was a strategy to hit up the Republican U.S. senators, for example, who voted against the DREAM Act. So it's now time to go and develop a relationship with them, talk to them, understand why they're against what we're trying to accomplish, and then understand why we're going to do focus groups, for example. It's the same thing with us. Maybe it's not so visible if we're lived our welcome a little bit, right? But behind the scenes, we should be working with folks who are against our causes, for example, to understand what drives them, and then maybe hit them at those angles. You know, does that make sense?
Keep your friends close.
Yes.
And your enemies closer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Favorite movie. Yep. I love The Godfather. We actually have a question in the back.
Hi, my name is Trina Rose. I'm a multimedia artist, but politically I first and foremost identify as disabled. I'm also queer, but disabled first politically. In 2008, I went down to Virginia Beach to work on the Democratic coordinated campaign, and which was very exciting because Virginia was the one that kind of pushed us over. In that office at Virginia Beach, there were a lot of phone banks to try to convince the red households to switch over to blue. Even within like the last couple of hours, you know, November 3rd, 2008. And I remember the day before that there were about 73 disabled voters who were ready to vote, but they didn't have a ride to the polls because they were disabled. The night before that, I stayed up and made this chart of which volunteers had a van and what times were available, and I was kind of running around like a chicken without a head creating this chart because their system was to put names of volunteers who would drive and the voters who needed rides to the polls in a folder. And that system doesn't work. What I'd like to ask is for 2012, and by the way, it was a very small percentage in Virginia Beach that actually won us over. That day, election day, we brought 73 people to the polls. And it was really, really quite exciting. But I do think that there needs to be more of an effort. I'd like to see that in 2012. And because bringing 73 Democratic voters to the polls on election day has a bigger success chance than convincing red to blue. And you know, for 2012, yeah, my question is, are there any initiatives in place? Or if not, can you consider this a need that should be met?
Thank you. It's a great question. 2012.
Yeah, so absolutely. You know, our community, the disability community, I think we just have some really traditional challenges, I think, getting campaigns to engage with us. And And so what AAPD, and I need to start by saying we are nonpartisan, so getting voters to the polls is important, no matter what, no matter who they're going to vote for. And we are right now actually putting together a plan for 2012, and accessibility and getting people to the polls is going to be a huge component. The Disability Vote Project that we have at AAPD is one of the cornerstones of what we do, and so, you know, we're really going to ramp that up. I think it's one of the reasons why, you know, the board of directors asked someone like me to come into a job like this rather than, you know, a lobbyist or policy person, and it's because of my organizing background. And so as we look, 2012 is going to be absolutely huge. I do think we're going to do things around absentee voting. You know, a lot of states have absentee voting ability, and so really helping folks get the ballots to them if they can't get to the polls. You know, and that actually is a traditional challenge, believe it or not, because a lot of folks get sort of angry that because people will use it as an excuse not to make the polling place accessible. So we don't have to make the polling place accessible. You can get the ballot by mail. But I think we need to do both. We need to make sure the polling place is accessible and that folks can vote, who want to can vote absentee.
And I actually have nothing to add to that. Mark is the expert on that topic, but I will thank you, Trina, because you got the president elected, it sounds like, single-handedly in Virginia. And you know what? We got a job out of the deal. So we owe her a lot of gratitude.
Yes, we do.